Hey guys, in this week's episode, we are going to discuss The Color Out of Space. But before that, we're going to talk about what we've been watching over the past week. The Island of Dr. Moreau, in honor of Richard Stanley, the director of Color Out of Space, as well as the accompanying documentary Lost Soul. So it's a Richard Stanley-a-thon.
That's catchy. We should coin that.
I just came up with it just now. Yeah.
Good job.
If that wasn't obvious.
No, not at all.
Join us!
Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is a man who's always telling us how much the alpacas cost. Mike, how are you doing today?
Well, as I'm thinking about it now, if I'm being honest, I don't think I have any idea how much an alpaca would cost.
Money.
In this day and age.
Yeah, costs money.
Thousands. That's my guess.
Thousands? Yeah.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Also joining us is a man who just finished his Wiccan ritual. Justin, how are you doing today?
Lame.
I'm sore because I had to cut myself a bunch, because that's apparently what you do during Wiccan rituals.
Make sure you get some Neosporin.
Yes.
Clear that right up so you can cut yourself next Wiccan ritual you have to do.
Yep.
And if this is your first time listening, normally we like to start off every episode in a section called News on the March, where we talk about film and TV news, or the movies or TV that we've been watching. Then we move into our feature review. This week we will be doing Richard Stanley's The Color Out of Space.
Is it the?
And guys,
I don't think it's the. It's just Color.
Is it? Oh, my bad. Just Color Out of Space. I think The Color Out of Space is a better title, personally, but...
It is, but it's less mysterious.
Who am I? Guys, in honor of Color Out of Space, I had a question for you.
Okay.
All right. If you could choose any movie, just for your own curiosity's sake, for John Frankenheimer to have to step in and direct in the past, that he's not maybe the best guy for, what movie would you like to see John Frankenheimer's version of?
Oh, man. Just for like entertainment's sake?
Yeah, like take like an artistic movie that requires like a vision and like to really comprehend the material, and then throw John Frankenheimer in there, and
Yeah. Watchmen.
Oh man, that'd be interesting.
I don't know that I can top that one. That one's a good one.
Yeah.
I think it'd just be so fun to, I mean, if the way that he handled and like turned Island of Dr. Moreau into what it is, what would Watchmen be like? Like how, I can't even imagine, but I would watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got one, Chris?
Well, mine's more recent, but I would like to see the redone version, or the in the middle redone version of Sonic the Hedgehog by John Frankenheimer. Like coming in the middle of it, he doesn't know what Sonic is or a hedgehog is. That'd be interesting.
Mine, I think would be like I tried to go with like a movie that was like troubled at the time, like a troubled shoot.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. That like they maybe would have like John Frankenheimer's like their fixer in like the late 90s, and I was thinking, oh man, what if they had brought him in for Eyes Wide Shut?
Oh God.
And Frankenheimer had to do his version of Eyes Wide Shut. To me, that would be hilarious. Like, can you imagine? Like, that's such like a I don't know, such a unique vision.
Yeah, I'm gonna redo mine. The Justice League one. Instead of Joss Whedon coming in to try to fix it, you get John Frankenheimer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, anyway, I thought that'd be fun in honor of what we're going to be talking about in What's on Our Minds. If you have no idea what we're talking about right now and you're confused because you just tuned in for a Color Out of Space review, we'll fill you in a minute.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Listening.
Yeah, one of the things we do here at the Casual Cinecast, when we're not confusing listeners, is we do Criterion episodes every other week.
We don't do anything else besides confuse listeners, really.
Yeah.
I do pride myself on that. We do a good job on that.
Why
but
am I
every
here?
other week, we do a Criterion episode, and that's a movie from the Criterion Collection, and we each choose one, and then we put it up to you, the listener, to vote on it out there in the interwebs, and we have a winner from last week's episode, and Mike, please, if you will, reveal that winner.
All right, on our last Casually Criterion episode, the Chasing Amy episode, we came up with the theme President's Day. It was a timely theme because that's when we recorded. Now, the options we chose for President's Day are Dr. Strangelove, which was Justin's, The Young Mr. Lincoln, which was mine, and Being There, which was Chris's. And to no one's surprise, the winner is Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove with 50% of the votes.
Yeah, it wasn't even really a contest.
No. So, Justin, you won the theme of President's Day. Mm-hmm. And the irony of this whole thing is you're not even going to be there for this episode.
I know, it's true. I'm going out of town on vacation, so I can't review it with you guys, but I can review it right now and say that it's a very good movie because I've seen it many times.
Spoilers, man, come on.
Yeah. We're trying to color our opinions of this movie that I've already seen.
Cool. Well, there you have my review. Stay tuned for everyone else's next week.
Yeah, and we'll also be having a guest to step in for Justin, so no worries there. You won't even feel his absence.
No, not at all. Cool. So if you want to vote in our future Criterion polls, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. We post the polls on Twitter, but we post about them on Facebook and Instagram and tell you to go to Twitter and vote. If you want to send in your questions and topics about the movies we're reviewing each week, you can send those to any of those social media accounts. You can also email those to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so and you like the show, help more people find the show by going onto iTunes, give us a 5-star review, and then, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show on wherever you're listening to this if you haven't already.
Okay, guys, we have a lot of episode ahead of us, so what do you say we go ahead and get into news on the march?
I'm
Let's
ready.
do this thing. Yeah.
Good.
I'm
Okay,
excited.
let's do this then.
All right.
Good.
Fine. I'm glad you're excited.
News on the march!
Okay, guys, thanks for meeting me here in News on the March. Before we get started, I think we're all going to talk about Lost Soul here in a minute and the island of Dr. Moreau in honor of Richard Stanley. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to know, what have you guys been up to this last week? There's been a lot of stuff on, a lot of TV shows and stuff coming back, and I have had my plate full of things to watch. But what about you guys? Justin?
Yes.
I just wanted to single you out so we could not have like a train wreck of you guys trying to talk at once.
Oh, that's probably a good idea. Well,
Good.
yeah, so
It didn't work.
no, not at all. So this week,
Yeah, nailed it. Good. I'm glad I did that.
yeah, thank you. So this week, I mean, I haven't watched a ton. I had a pretty busy weekend and relatively busy week, but I have been watching Outlander.
Ooh, yeah.
At you guys' suggestion. Right now, I'm kind of early on, like 3 or 4 episodes into season 2. So I'm doing that, which has been pretty fun. Also, kind of for a lighter fare, my fiance and I are switching through. We're watching through Seinfeld for our first time, and we're, I think, on season 6 or 7 right now. And then,
Oh, good. You're into the good years for a couple years now.
It's fantastic. And we're doing a rewatch of 30 Rock, which is hilarious in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sitcoms. I think
Yeah.
I'm learning the more and more I rewatch it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I have been toying with the idea of doing a 30 Rock rewatch with my girlfriend because she's never seen it.
Ooh.
But then also, equally, I need to show her The Sopranos because we have that Sopranos movie coming out this year at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so lots of good stuff out there right now.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it. I haven't really caught any movies or anything. Not that I can think of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's mostly just been those TV shows. So what are you watching, Chris?
Yes, this weekend I, surprise, went to the Alamo Draft House, and they were doing a mystery movie marathon with the theme of Pulp Fiction. And it was actually a lot of fun. They showed Flash Gordon was the first movie that they showed, which was a lot of fun. I hadn't seen it before. And then they showed The Phantom. And then they showed Zone Troopers.
With Billy Zane, the Phantom?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I first saw that movie at a drive-in whenever I was a little kid.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, like at the Granbury Drive-In.
It's
And
definitely a
so
fun
I
one.
have actually
Yeah.
very fond memories of watching Billy Zane's The Phantom.
Yeah. And it has Catherine Zeta-Jones in it, which I was surprised by.
Does it? Oh, my God.
Yeah. Then we watched Zone Troopers, which is like this low-budget World War II movie. It's like World War II meets E.T. because they discover an alien while they're behind enemy lines, which was a lot of fun. And then we
That sounds
also...
fun.
Yeah. We watched The Shadow, which ties into 30 Rock because it has Alec Baldwin in it.
Yes, it does.
Man, what is it with these like B superhero movies from the 90s?
Well, it's Pulp Fiction.
Pulp
So it's
Fiction.
like superhero movies. Like they wanted to show The Rocketeer was one of the ones, but it's Disney, so they couldn't show it.
The Rocketeer's
So there's
awesome.
some other ones, yeah. And then the last one was The Mask of Zorro, which was like the VIP in this bunch. And I don't know how you guys feel about The Mask of Zorro, but I really
good
liked
movie.
it when I saw it. Yeah, I hadn't seen it before. I think I'd seen parts of it and stuff, but yeah, I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And it also has Catherine Zeta-Jones in it. So
Yeah, I was about to say, that's the Catherine Zeta-Jones I remember her being. That's the movie I remember her being in out of this
Yeah.
whole list of movies you mentioned just now.
yeah, for sure. But it was a ton of fun. I love the mystery movie marathons because oftentimes they show movies that I wouldn't necessarily sit down and watch, but I'm never upset that I did watch them in the movie marathon. You know.
Let me ask you this: had you seen The Shadow before?
I had. That was actually I had listened to the radio show, like The Shadow was originally a radio show with Orson Welles.
How old are
and
you?
I'd listened to that. Huh?
How old are you?
Yeah,
Well,
you
my
sound
dad-
like an old man.
Yes.
I remember the radio shows with Orson Welles,
I'm eternal.
but not the movie from the 90s.
The radio shows. No, my dad for some reason bought them, and so I would listen to them like on car trips and stuff. So when it came out in the movie, I went and watched it with my dad. I remember doing that, and I was really excited when that movie came out.
I had the same experience with The Shadow too. The Granbury Drive-In.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you're describing like my like time before 10 years old.
Yeah, so that was kind of what I was up to this weekend. I had a great time. Mike, what have you been up to?
Oh man, not having as good a time as you. That sounds like reliving the 90s. Sounds pretty fun to me.
It was.
I have been watching a lot of TV. This week we have the return of Better Call Saul. We also have the Clone Wars returning on Disney Plus, which I've been watching. And also Outlander Season 5. I'm also watching Outlander, Justin.
Hooray. I'm not alone.
Lots of stuff going on. But I think the only thing that I can really go into any detail about, I'm not going to talk about Outlander, since Justin's now watching it. I don't want to really hint at anything that's going on.
Please don't.
I won't. Better Call Saul. I just want to say that the first 2 episodes of Season 5 are out right now. The first one came out on Sunday night and the second one on Monday night. I just want to say that this show continues to be probably the best show on TV right now. I'm going to be sad to see it go. I think they've confirmed that it's going to end with Season 6.
Correct.
Man, we're 2 episodes into Season 5 right now, and it's already just firing on all cylinders, like going really fast. It feels more like Breaking Bad than ever. But we always say that every year, but I always feel like that's a disservice to it because really, I think years ago, the show surpassed Breaking Bad. So now I think it's this really crazy thing where like the prequel spinoff that no one wanted is officially better than Breaking Bad right now. So if they can stick the landing with this show, like, I don't know, I get the feeling that, like, when it's all said and done, like between Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, and El Camino, I think it'd be fun to, like, find out if there's any overlap when it's said and done, because Better Call Saul is getting really, really close to Breaking Bad timeline right now. Mm-hmm. So I think it'd be really fun to, like, wait till the show's over and then maybe, like, splice the episodes into chronological order.
Right.
And so, like, you might start Better Call Saul and then have episodes of Breaking Bad and then have episodes of Better Call Saul scattered in between them, you know?
That'd be cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I get the feeling that's kind of where it's going to be going. And that's exactly the same kind of stuff that is fun about Star Wars, right? Like cross-media stuff, like stories that interconnect. And I'm a big sucker for that kind of thing. So I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a show that I keep meaning to start, but, you know, these other things keep getting suggested, and all there's like new TV shows come out all the time, and though it seems like there's something that's like hot and new and needs to be watched more immediately.
I know. And the problem is, the more I tell you to watch it, or anyone tells you to watch it, the more it's going to be built up.
Right.
And then the more when you start watching it, it has even bigger shoes to fill, you know?
You have to choose it for yourself, Justin.
Yeah, you got to
choose
find it at the right time. Like, you got to want to watch it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm waiting for that moment to strike, and it will, because I'm interested. It's just got to be the right time when I need a new show to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. Maybe it is, but Robert Forster's last appearance was a surprise in this last Better Call Saul episode, which was nice.
Oh.
Yeah, I watched the first episode and I saw him in there, and I felt really good. I was glad that he got to be in it for that last moment.
I'm glad El Camino and Better Call Saul gave him like one last few months to shine, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Nice.
So this week we were watching Richard Stanley's newest film, Color Out of Space, which is his first film since the 90s. And so Richard Stanley is a guy that has been, well, sort of in like the back of my brain for a long time. And I guess I'll gonna lead us into this. So in the 90s, there was a movie called The Island of Dr. Moreau, starring Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer and David Thewlis. And it was directed by John Frankenheimer, but it was written and brainstormed and sort of brought into existence by Richard Stanley, the director of Color Out of Space. He was a young, upcoming indie director at this time, with only like a couple of projects under his belt. Anyone who remembers The Island of Dr. Moreau from the 90s probably knows that movie didn't go super well. Until this documentary came out, I don't think I realized like how badly it went. There had always been rumors, you know, circulating, but this documentary came out called Lost Soul in 2014, and it interviews and documents the extensive making of process of Richard Stanley trying to get his vision of the Island of Dr. Moreau out into the world, and every obstacle and hurdle that came along the way, down to him being fired and replaced, and even more than that. It goes into some pretty crazy areas. So, yeah, because of The Color Out of Space, you know, we watched it for this, and after watching it, I really, really wanted to, I guess, know what his version of the Island of Dr. Moreau would have been like. And I think the documentary, Lost Soul, you sort of get him talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to get us started, because we watched both The Island of Dr. Moreau and the documentary Lost Soul in preparation for this. With both of these things, and well, let's start this way. Justin and Chris. Justin first. What do you think about The Island of Dr. Moreau? What was that experience like for you?
Boring. Mostly.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, there's some interest there to look at that movie and just how strange and weird it is, and just thinking of like, how did this end up this way? There's some interest there while watching it, but also it's kind of like, how did this end up so like bad and like unrewarding, I think it felt like. And I don't know. It's just a super mess of a movie that I found neither like fun in a bad way or like entertaining in any sort of good way. And it's weird. It's like, I got the vibe that like, I think a lot of people have about, to talk about a more recent film, Cats, while watching it. And partly that's because there's weird people in like kind of like inexplicable makeup. But I don't know. It's just all around to me like a real bad, bland movie. Like it knowing the story behind it, like you can see how it ends up that way because it feels like someone's making a movie they have zero investment in. Like the zero cares about like the heart of the movie or what it's really about. And I think that shines through real hard. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Not a fan. So I guess pass it off to Chris.
Yeah. I didn't think it was as boring as you say. It wasn't good, certainly not. I felt it was a little bit more like watching a train wreck, and I found that interesting. I watched this before I watched Lost Souls, so
Same.
I kind of wish maybe I had done it the other way around, and then maybe the movie would have been a little bit more interesting. As you try to like parse, well, what was Richard Stanley's idea, and what's John Frankenheimer's idea, and apparently what was Marlon Brando's idea? You know, those kind of things
and Val
may have made
Kilmer's.
the movie. Yeah, Val Kilmer's as well. Yeah, what may have made the movie more interesting as you watch it, like parsing out who's at fault for these things, you know?
Yeah.
But it's certainly not a good movie. But I think there are glimmers, like way underneath the surface of what could have been. And I think especially after watching Color Out of Space, you kind of get an idea of where he's coming from, Richard Stanley. But yeah, that's kind of my experience. Mike, how did you like it?
Well, I first saw this movie on VHS back when it came out in the 90s, and I was 9 years old at the time. But even at that age, when I watched it for the first time, I realized there was something up with this movie. It was so bizarre, and I mean, I never forgot sequences in it, you know? It left an impression on me. Even to the point where later I bought the original Island of Dr. Moreau book because I remember this movie kind of always stood out in my brain as like this train wreck of a movie that I saw when I was a little kid. And because I saw it when I was a little kid, I didn't really pick up on like the director not being inspired. I just picked up on like just the bizarreness of the movie, you know? Mm-hmm. And it felt more like a train wreck to me, I guess, than boring at the time. I was really fascinated by the makeup and everything because even still, I think the makeup is pretty good.
Yeah.
For what they were trying to do. Yeah, I mean, cut to a few years later, I guess it was probably 2015 when I saw it. I was on Netflix one day just scrolling through, and I saw Lost Soul on there, the documentary. And it kind of brought back all the memories of this movie, of the Island of Dr. Moreau. And I didn't really rewatch it at the time, but I watched the documentary, and I remember being like, oh, that explains why that movie was just such a mess, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I didn't think much about it until Color Out of Space came back around. And I kind of wanted to dive back into it after watching it and see if I could parse at the script level kind of what was a Richard Stanley thing and then what was like a John Frankenheimer not caring thing, or a Marlon Brando, Val Kilmer being maniacal thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it was really for me. After Color Out of Space, I really just kind of wanted to go back and dissect this movie because I think at one point there could have been a really good movie here, or at least a disturbing horror movie, like in the same vein of like. You know, it's kind of a campy movie now because it's from the 90s, but do you remember Event Horizon?
Yes.
Like, I remember whenever I was a little kid, that movie was pretty respected amongst, like, little kids. Like, they all thought it was pretty creepy, you know? It may not hold up now. I don't want to speak for it, but I get the feeling that the Island of Dr. Moreau was going to be, like, that really kind of crazy, grindhousey 90s alt horror. that was really going on at the time. But we ended up with something else entirely. But
yeah, like, I don't know how you would. I mean, maybe you're describing this movie in this way, but like whatever genre. Do you remember that movie, Mike, that we watched at one time, The Reflecting Skin?
yeah.
Like just this sort of like bizarre, like not quite like real universe. Like it's almost like David Lynch, like.
Or like Cronenberg.
Yeah, Cronenberg is a good example. But yeah, it would have been a little bit more edgy and pushed some boundaries, and if not had like
something like The Fly or Dead Ringers.
Yeah, like if it hadn't had any more than like the book's like central themes and ideas to it, it would at least be like an interesting watch for like how disturbing it is.
Yeah.
You know, which that has some value.
I agree. So that's kind of where I was coming from in encouraging you guys to watch all of this Richard Stanley information with me this week.
The one thing I want to say that about Island of Dr. Moreau that I'm thankful for and I did enjoy was seeing the inspiration for Austin Powers for Mini-Me and the scene
I was about to ask you guys.
Yeah, the scene where Dr. Evil and Mini-Me play the duet on the piano thing. I don't know. I don't know if it's probably because it's such a joke because of Austin Powers now, but like to see that scene set in like the somewhat serious like weird movie that Island of Dr. Moreau is, like to see that scene in there is like pretty funny. and it was just cool like seeing, I'm like, oh, this is where they got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoyed that scene, just to have like my mind kind of, blown a little bit of like, wow.
Well, okay. So the reason I tried to frame this as talking about the movie first is because after you get into the documentary, you start to realize just kind of like how everything got so fucked, basically. And it's fascinating endlessly to me. First of all, like, the documentary starts out with Richard Stanley talking about, the movie he didn't get to direct. So we know right away, even if you don't follow who ended up finishing the product, so okay, the main guy that this movie's about, it's the doomed journey of Richard Stanley is the Island of Dr. Moreau. So we know something's going to happen. So when I started it, I was thinking, okay, a very sympathetic tale to Richard Stanley, right? Like he's going to be like, it's going to see what happened, where I'm going to find out all these rumors I've been hearing over the years whenever I talk about this movie. I'm going to get a documentary talking about these things now. But really, right off the bat, Richard Stanley's portrayed as like a pretty goofy, weird guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, my mother was a witch and practiced witchcraft, and I went to my sorcerer friend and got him to cast a spell over the meeting to make sure that the meeting went well. And like,
yeah,
right off the bat, you're like, oh man, how did they ever give this guy like a movie? You know what I mean? Like, so you understand kind of just right off the bat, like I understand right off, like from the get-go where they went wrong. Like this guy should not be in charge of anything other than like indie movies,
Maybe.
Or at least not for his first time.
Well, it's 1996, right? And I mean, I guess when they were developing it would have been like 1994. And I mean, there was this sort of, at that time, like sort of a new wave of like giving young directors like a shot of, on the heels of like Tarantino and stuff.
Yeah, even Kevin Smith and
yeah. So you can kind of see how they would do that, especially because he did have like a couple of successful movies in that like indie grindhouse horror sort of world.
Well, and he seemed passionate about the material. Like he brought it to life, the concept art, the script. Like they weren't like we're gonna make the Island of Dr. Moreau. Who's the best guy?
Right. Exactly.
Like, Hollywood wasn't thinking about this movie, so he brought it to the table. He approached Marlon Brando. Like he got the wheels moving on this thing. It's just fascinating to watch it all kind of like fall apart in slow motion, it seems like, as they're describing it.
Yeah.
And I guess it all started really with Val Kilmer. From what I gather is that's the main thing there. Like I think the studio may have already had like questions about Richard Stanley being a goofy guy and maybe not being able to be up to like pressure. It seems like the perfect storm of things happening. Like Marlon Brando's daughter killed herself. Val Kilmer, from the description of the stories, it sounded like he was on a lot of drugs.
Probably.
Yeah. Because like everything that they're describing that he said or did makes no sense.
Yeah.
And seems really mean.
To me, what I kind of came away with was Richard Stanley was green, and he made a lot of green decisions. Because, like, later on, like, location-wise, you know, and stuff like that, like, picking the locations an hour away from the hotel, and stuff like that was kind of, like, those were green decisions. And if you're making those wrong decisions, and you add on top of that, like, the intrinsic pressure of a Val Kilmer or Marlon Brando, it's going to spin out of control. There's no way, you know, like, I think even a expert director is going to have a very hard time dealing with all those decisions and those actors. So yeah, it was whoever's producer was, I think, should have done a little bit more work, or maybe we shouldn't get Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando in here. I don't know, something along those lines.
Right. Well, and I think, was it Marlon Brando had just been on a movie with the same company too, who had like they had really horrible problems with him on that. And even the producers were like, "Oh well, guess we'll work with him again." And even some of the other people at like New Line who produced this movie were like, "Are we sure we want to go with Brando again?" But like no one offered to like step in and help this guy, probably as much as they should have if they're going to take on, you know, someone so new to like big budget productions.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I read later that Marlon Brando felt bad and offered to pay Richard Stanley his full director's salary or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the documentary, Richard Stanley, even when he looks back on Marlon Brando, he talks about him fondly. So I don't get the feeling that Richard Stanley felt that Marlon Brando was at fault for like his firing, because based on the timeline presented in the documentary, it seems like Marlon Brando didn't even show up until long after Richard Stanley had been fired.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
I think it was Val Kilmer. And I think the problem is, like, if Marlon Brando had been there and been checked in and present, you know, and probably because his daughter had killed himself is the reason he wasn't. But if he had been there, because it seems like Marlon Brando and Richard Stanley kind of got this made together. And then tragedy befell Marlon Brando on top of him maybe being flaky anyway. It seems like he just stopped caring about the movie once Richard Stanley was gone, and then kind of like wanted to sabotage it and make it bad.
Yeah, it seems like he wanted to see what he could get away with, and like I think that's my favorite part of this whole story, and even like watching The Island of Dr. Moreau is, you know, thinking about the scenes in the movie that were just so bizarre, and then hearing them like explained in the story of the documentary of like he would just come up with these like random ideas, and like he just like showed up like painted in white or whatever and wearing sunglasses so that his stunt double could be in most of his shots and stuff. Like, and how he just like took a liking to the little guy. What is his name?
Man, you got me.
Yeah, no, I can't remember his name, but like he just befriended him and like fell in love with him. So he's like, oh, he's going to be with me in every scene now. Instead of this other character, we have like a whole script where he's the guy who's with me in every scene. And just like, I loved hearing all of those stories. Like, I could listen to a documentary about Marlon Brando fucking with a production like this. It's pretty
Nelson
entertaining.
de la Rosa.
Thank you.
Is his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is entertaining. I would like to see a film made about the making of the Island of Dr. Moreau, disaster artist style, you know, like, because it's just so chaotic. And then, and I guess spoilers for Lost Soul, you know, if you don't want to, I mean, you kind of know what happens, but like, anyway, spoilers. But at the end, I loved the idea that Richard Stanley is actually in the movie. Like, he dresses up as one of the animals and goes to set like every day and acts in the film. I think that's just so awesome.
Yeah. I love that everybody knew, like all of the like workers that were on the film with him before he got fired knew
that he was there.
But they didn't tell, like, you know, John Frankenheimer or the producers, because, you know, he's supposed to be like barred from set. But I love that they all just were kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. we'll like conspire together to get him in the film because that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and like these people, like these extras and these actors were supposed to be there for like 6 weeks and like all the production hell. Like they end up staying in this hotel like in isolation with just each other for like months. So like there's
6
like
months,
this
I
like
think the one girl said.
yeah, there's like this chaotic atmosphere going on of just like a bunch of extras partying all the time because they have nothing else to do.
Yeah.
It actually like it kind of turns into the story of Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah,
like it descends into madness.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, it seems like the whole production was just madness, and the crew was like, I don't know, they hated the director, they hated the producers, and like they started resenting being there, and I don't know, it just seems like the perfect storm, really.
Yeah, the story about the peacock, I think, is my favorite thing from the Lost Soul. Where like the guy's like, I remember seeing a peacock. And, Marlon Brando demands peacock feathers, and he's like, I remember seeing a peacock. And so he drives, tackles the peacock, rips the feathers out of the peacock, and drives back. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I like the story of Marlon Brando talking to the German actor and being like, I speak German, and like mumbling Marlon Brando in German, and when the guy's like, I don't understand, like Marlon Brando kind of wrote him off. And then with the Nelson De La Rosa little guy, he was like, who is Spanish, or he's not Spanish, but he speaks Spanish, and yeah, he tells him like, oh, I speak Spanish, and like mumbled some incoherent, non-existent Spanish, and the guy was Nelson De La Rosa was like, yeah, cool, like thumbs up. And,
Okay.
and like from the sound of it, it's like from that moment on, he just like fell in love with him. And he was like his favorite guy because he tried to like mess with him or something, and he just went along with it. And I really love that story.
For sure.
Marlon Brando just seems like a crazy old man.
Yeah, I mean, at that point.
So I heard a story once about the making of Dr. Moreau. It's not in the documentary, and I don't even know if it's true or not, but whenever I was at SFA, one of our fellow film students said that he heard this story. So probably not true, but just in case it is, it's a good story. So apparently during the filming of The Island of Dr. Moreau, at one point someone had asked Val Kilmer what time it was, and Val Kilmer freaked out on them and was like, do I look like a watch to you or something like that? Or like, do I look like here to tell you your time or something like that? I don't know. Like, kind of mean.
Yeah.
And apparently the next day or sometime later, when Val Kilmer got to set, he realized that everyone had a really nice like Rolex watch except for him.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently Marlon Brando had bought everyone a watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't have any idea if that's true or not, but yeah, but apparently Marlon Brando did not like Val Kilmer either. They didn't like each other.
Seems
And the
understandable.
whole trailer thing, like neither one of them wanted to come out of their trailers till the other one did.
Oh, yeah.
It's like classic Hollywood. Like that's like a BoJack skit.
For sure.
Yeah.
That would be in BoJack. I think both of those actors are BoJack in some way or another.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anything else about either of these things, The Island of Dr. Moreau or Lost Soul?
They're better together than just watching Island of Dr. Moreau.
For sure.
Yeah. And probably both more interesting after you've watched the movie we're about to review.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Well, speaking of that movie, are you guys ready to review and talk about Color Out of Space?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it. Get my crayon so I can color out of space.
Look at this.
All those years in the big city, we finally got out. We're living the dream.
Maybe it is a dream.
Then everything just blew up. Big flash, like a pink light. Or actually, I don't even know what color it was. It wasn't like any color I'd ever seen before.
Looks like a meteorite. I mean, it's radioactive. I mean, it's from space, right? Meteorites are generally no more dangerous than ordinary rocks.
How can something that big just disappear? Did you plant those?
No.
Ward, you come here for a sec.
Oh, God.
What are you doing? Shh. It's talking to me. Who's talking to you? A man in the well.
It's in the static, it's in the moisture. It's in here, is out there. And what's out there is in here now.
Everything's under control.
Why are you so in denial? That ding from the meteorite changes everything around it.
It's just a color. But it burns.
Do you believe me now?
I don't know what I believe anymore. Everything's gonna be A-okay.
Okay, so as always with our new films that are out, we're going to be doing a non-spoiler section first. We'll be giving general thoughts, no spoilers. And before we start talking spoilers, we will give you a warning, play a bumper so that you have a nice long spoiler alert in which you can pause the podcast, go watch Color Out of Space, and then come back and finish listening.
All right, so The Color Out of Space was directed by Richard Stanley, starring Nicolas Cage, Jolie Richardson, and Madeline Arthur? I don't know.
Madeline?
The IMDb synopsis says, a secluded farm is struck by a strange meteorite which has apocalyptic consequences for the family living there and possibly the world.
Perhaps.
Okay, so I'll get us started. I think this movie has the unfortunate position of being released after Annihilation.
Mm-hmm. I thought about that movie a couple of times, and I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't see how you couldn't.
Yeah.
So many of the crazier elements felt very similar to that movie. But, you know, we'll try to take this movie on its own. Yeah, it's not super fair. I think it's kind of a bummer. There's really no way I can watch this movie without thinking of spoilers for my thoughts of this movie. The superior movie, Annihilation.
Oh, I disagree with you on that, but
okay, that's good. Yeah. But yeah, very similar ideas. This movie is a solid attempt at like a Lovecraftian horror. It's not my thing really, but there are some cool ideas in there. I can see a lot of Cronenberg inspiration in this thing. Here's what I'll say. It made me wish I could have seen his version of The Island of Dr. Moreau. And it made me want to go back and do all that stuff, which we've already talked about. So the movie didn't do a whole lot for me, but nor is it the train wreck that I had always associated with this guy for decades, you know? And it made me kind of wish that like things had gone differently for him to see where he could be at this point instead. Because I think he's got a good eye for visuals. I think he's got a good eye for story. I think maybe just execution feels a little underwhelming in some places.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think maybe reining in Nicolas Cage would have been a little nice, because this is not one of the performances where I felt like Nicolas Cage flying off the handle doing his Nicolas Cage-isms was the best decision.
Doing his Trump impression.
Yeah, whatever he's doing.
I have thoughts about that.
It's distracting and strange, but overall, I'd say this movie is a good effort. It's a valiant, nice indie horror effort. If you like indie horror and grindhousey type horror, this is right up your alley. There's a lot to like here. But ultimately, after Annihilation, all the ideas in here just feel a little recycled and old, even though H.P. Lovecraft, I realize, wrote the source material before the Annihilation source material came out. But just a little too samey, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at.
Nice. Do you want to give it a star rating?
I'm still thinking about it, to be honest with you, but I would say 3 out of 5.
Okay, it's not too bad.
It's a well executed horror movie. It's just a type of horror movie that's not really my cup of tea.
Yeah, I could see this becoming kind of a cult classic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when The Thing came out, you know, it was not well received, and everybody loves The Thing now. You know, I can see something along those lines happening with this movie.
Before we move on to you guys, when I'm wrapping up my thoughts, let me say this. I like it better than the other Nicolas Cage movie that came out like a couple years ago, Mandy, that we reviewed.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, like it's like the same vein as that, like indie horror, visionary, lots of neat visuals, and both are well made in their own way, but I like this miles better than that.
Yeah, I think my feeling on that is that Mandy needed Nicolas Cage, and I kind of agree with you on this, and I guess this will just kind of go into my thoughts as well, but Nicolas Cage, we didn't necessarily need the crazy Nicolas Cage in this.
Right.
And also, as I was watching it, just having cast Nicolas Cage, I was wondering if they had cast a different actor, would I be more surprised once Nicolas Cage starts doing Nicolas Cage stuff, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as Nicolas Cage is cast, I know, okay, this is what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But if you had another actor, maybe it'd be more interesting. Not that I don't like watching Nicolas Cage go unhinged, but it does you kind of know what you're in for, right? Especially now that he's done so many of those.
I think that's very similar. Like you put into words what I couldn't. I think Nicolas Cage. This movie did not need his presence. Yeah,
and I think Mandy did. Like,
agreed.
Like Mandy needed to go crazy, and Nicolas Cage crazy, right? But anyways, the thing I loved most about this film was the way it looked. Like even before things start getting weird, I think this movie looked really, really nice and really good. So I appreciated that throughout the whole movie. I thought it was really good. I think the performances around Nicolas Cage were really good, even though, and I appreciate Nicolas Cage, but it was a little maybe too much for me. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm a little kind of on the same page as you. I can see this becoming, a much more cult classic, down the road. Also, there's rumors that he's going to do an H.P. Lovecraft trilogy, Richard Stanley. So I kind of hope that I get to see the rest of the movies, the other two. I think that would be interesting because I'm not mad at this film. Like I enjoyed it. Yeah. I had a good time. It's just not. It doesn't ever rise above. It doesn't ever rise above what it is. It is what it is, and for that I enjoy it. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I didn't realize he was going to do an H.P. Lovecraft trilogy. That actually, I am curious in that. That sounds really interesting. I also agree this movie looks really interesting. It's a really attractive looking indie movie, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting that Richard Stanley, he seems to gravitate towards very old horror. Like The Island of Dr. Moreau was published in 1894, 1896, something like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We all know H.P. Lovecraft stuff is very old as well. So I think it's pretty cool that Richard Stanley tends to gravitate towards these horror that has stood the test of time kind of horror, Yeah.
And I think after watching Lost Soul, it's kind of apparent like what kind of person he is, like with the Wiccan and the witch and stuff like that. It
kind of explains that girl character in this movie.
Yeah. So you kind of get the idea of what's going on.
His mother was a witch.
Yeah. So, Justin, what are your thoughts?
Well, other than what you said, which I think is maybe the best thing you can say about this movie, is that it is what it is. Like, it doesn't necessarily, rise above that, which to me isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I do enjoy it for what it is. I think maybe the way it does rise above is, or at least like now, it has some very cheesy sort of special effects to it. Like, it's like, imagine if someone had just like blown special effects out of the ballpark in the 80s and done like a really amazing effects work in the 80s. Like, it would look like this, if that makes sense. Because I think other than some bad CG here and there in a couple spots, like most of the special effects look really good and are really interesting, but in a very campy way. Mm-hmm. So I do like that about it. I think the story's pretty good, but there are some moments that feel a little like we're running through some horror movie cliches. Yeah. That I hoped they would do something a little different with and step them up. We get like some creepy kid stuff, we get some Wiccan stuff, we get some creepy phone calls, and like I kind of wanted it to ultimately end up like like there's movies that sometimes you think like, okay, I've seen this before, and then it kind of goes one extra step to like really make you be okay with like its clichéness, because you have to go through the cliche to get to like what new thing it has to say.
Right.
I kept hoping for that several times during
like
this
in
movie.
Shutter Island, when the twist happens, but then like you're like, this is lame, but then like the last scene happens and you're like, oh, that's why we had to sit through this dumb twist.
Right. Yes. That's exactly it. And I mean, I would be lying if I said that I wasn't fully entertained the whole time, like in terms of like waiting for what's happening next, and like I really wanted to see where the story was going, and I was into it and was never bored necessarily. Like, yes, I noticed things that like I wish were better, but I was entertained the whole time. So I do like this movie. I think I agree that about Nicolas Cage, although I have some theories of why he does some of the things that he does, but I won't get into those until spoilers. And maybe some of those things could have been done by somebody else. I wouldn't argue against that. But I imagine Nicolas Cage is in this movie to help it get made and help it sell.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
So I get that.
Especially, an independent movie like this, you stick Nicolas Cage in, people will pay to see Nicolas Cage go unhinged. So that's definitely
It is definitely like it's like a market. There's like faith-based movies and like indie horror films, and now like just like indie Nick Cage film. That's just like it's a market that we go, well, my film will be successful now to an extent.
Unhinged Nicolas Cage, the genre.
Yeah.
There's an inherent market in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyways, that's basically my general thoughts. Like I think I like this movie a little bit more than you guys. Like I'm kind of in the 3.5 star range, just in the range in the sense that like I was entertained from start to finish. It had a lot of elements of other, sort of Cronenberg or John Carpenter, The Thing, elements to it that I really enjoyed. And I don't know, we'll talk more. So let's go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Spoiler sounds good to me.
Oh, yeah. You want to go there now?
This thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've kind of danced around it. I think I'm sitting at 3.5. Good for grindhousey horror fans, but not necessarily my cup of tea.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of about the same.
Yeah.
Like 3.5 is me. Maybe I just had more negative things to say about it.
I think, yeah. Actually, the one thing, I know, I'll save this for spoilers. Let's go.
Let's go.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
You know, cigarettes you got up there, I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
All right. So now that we are in spoilers, Justin, what were you saving?
Well, I was going to say maybe the one performance I could call out that is even more standouty than Nicolas Cage, and yes, standouty is a term, would be Tommy Chong.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a weird...
I forgot about him.
Yeah, it's such a weird role, and like he's such a distinct guy that you can't separate. You can't separate like Tommy Chong out from a role ever. And I don't know. That one bothers me more than Nick Cage, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you could cut Tommy Chong's character out completely, and the movie would miss nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a little exposition, but you could get it from somewhere else, maybe.
Yeah, I thought there was a little bit of fun coming from him because he's when I think it's the hydrologist character and the cop go out to visit him, and he babbles off that like sort of inexplicable. Or no, it's not the cop. Is it? Maybe it's when the hydrologist just visits him by himself. But he is like, oh, what's inside is outside, and what's outside is inside. And
oh yeah, that was pretty awesome.
He gives that like really mysterious thing, which like gave me something to think about constantly throughout the movie.
Yeah.
So I kind of appreciate that he's there from that, but maybe we could have got it from somewhere else.
Well, I mean, that's where the Lovecraftian stuff comes in. Like the idea that there is like a horror out there that is incomprehensible to us, right? Like the idea that like there's a horror out there that like manipulates us on a molecular level. from a different plane of existence. That's like the horror in there, right? And I think that's where that scene really kind of like sells that, I think, because I think when I think of Lovecraft, I always think of like really old, mysterious horror that you can't comprehend, or something that's like unfathomable to humans, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like what he's known for, is like this really like nightmarish stuff. And so like I liked whenever we see like the vision of like where this came from, and it's like a different realm of existence, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty cool. Like I really appreciate all that. Like I think he kind of captured that Lovecraftian vibe that I always get from like the texts and like the pictures and stuff when I go to Barnes and Noble and look at H.P. Lovecraft stuff, but never ultimately buy it.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the vibe and the tone of the movie, you know, I mean that works for me. That keeps me into it. Like maybe
I would have liked a little bit more of that mystery, though, like that mystery from places unknown. You know, I mean, like it's inherent into the story and into the idea. But I don't know. I would have liked more of like that vision moment where he kind of sees like the realm that this is kind of shaping them into. You know what I mean? I don't even know what's happening exactly, but like I get the idea that the meteorite is like transforming their world into like the realm that it came from, or a realm similar to that one, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish there had been a little bit more exploration in that, but I don't know, maybe less is more there.
Yeah. I love that moment. I do think I think less is more is right in that moment. I also think we might be getting more movies, so like we might explore that further. One of the things I do like about this movie, and I realized as I was watching it, I don't know that I've ever actually seen an H.P. Lovecraft movie, or like something that's adapted H.P. Lovecraft. I know it's out there, but I'm not sure that I've ever actually watched it. I think a lot of it's really old. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
but,
it's very old.
Yeah, I think what I have seen, though, is a lot of influence from H.P. Lovecraft. You know, there's a lot of that out there. I mean, like Cloverfield is the first one that comes to mind. I think the monster's like based on Cthulhu or around that, or looks like it. You know, so there's a lot of H.P. Lovecraft influence on the stuff that we watch.
Yeah, George R.R. Martin in the Game of Thrones books and the A Song of Ice and Fire is technically what they're called. But he has a lot of H.P. Lovecraft influence in the world that he builds, you know? There's always like unknown mysteries of like depth from below the sea, and like old civilizations that are long past that like no one knows where they came from. Like H.P. Lovecraft's all about the mystery.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciated getting to see this like an actual adaptation as opposed to, you know, just influences. So I appreciated that in this. Also, did you guys want to talk about Nicolas Cage's performance? I know you had some theories about it, Justin, but I just wanted to say that it was really weird to watch because, you know, Nicolas Cage starts to go into his thing. Did you guys get Trump from him at all? Like, it seemed like when he started going eccentric, he was doing a Trump impression. Like, he started sounding, maybe it just sounded New York. And
I hear it now.
Yeah. It took me a minute to recognize it, to be like, where have I heard this weird voice accent for? And it's like, it's kind of like Stephen Colbert's bad Trump impression.
Yeah.
Is what it sounds like. It's not like spot on Trump. It's like spot on bad Trump.
Yeah, it's not Trumpy enough to where like I caught that that's what that voice was. But thinking back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, that explains why it made me so mad.
Yeah, it's such a weird choice. And okay, so here's my theory. I'll lay it out, and maybe we can talk about it, and maybe you guys can be like, you're an idiot, and dismiss it, and we won't talk about it. But
deal.
I've noticed the Trump thing, and there was a lot of times I was trying to figure out what this movie is necessarily about and what it's like sort of a metaphor for. And I'm sure it's a metaphor for something when H.P. Lovecraft made it, maybe not. But like, why make this movie now is what I kept, thinking. And
because people finally gave him money.
Yeah. But
sorry, go ahead.
No. So I guess there were some other things which I'll talk about in a minute, like that led me to thinking this, but like I started thinking about, is this movie saying something about Trump and like politics in general, and like the way that it's just like invading and like dividing all of us, or I guess because I started thinking that like when you mix like red and blue together, you get purple, and the like predominant like scary purple, the scary color is purple. and I was trying to place this Trump impression. Or maybe even it's just like Trump came and just destroyed like politics, and like it's destroying this family, and then they can't get away. I don't know. Maybe I'm way off base. You guys tell me.
I have to say, I love the red and blue makes purple. That's awesome. I don't know about anything else, but
there was also this like inexplicable mayor character who's played by what is her name? Karanka Kilcher, who's the girl from the New World who plays the Pocahontas type character in the New World. Yeah. Who's a relatively, recognizable actress, at least for me, because I spotted her immediately. And so I was like, what is she going to do? And she, maybe even more so than the Tommy Chong character, I don't know why she was there other than to be this like force that like they want to build a water thing and sort of this like government thing that wants to do something with this land.
She was going to buy the house.
Yeah. So
it's got like the Deliverance ending where like all this horror is going to be covered up by a dam soon. Which felt kind of like weird and tacked on at the end, kind of. But I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to pull meaning out of something that is this old nightmarish story that's about being a nightmarish story, Well, I mean, maybe there's something there. I didn't get that whenever I was watching it, but I don't know about the red and blue makes purple thing. But I think maybe there's something. Cause his voice is definitely doing a Trump impression. Now that you've called it out, I hear it. So, I mean, maybe, there's like the idea that you're slowly being changed from the inside by this outside force, whether it's good or bad. Once the outside force hits the scene, things start changing.
Also, I don't think Richard Stanley is American, so I don't know,
he's not
how into American politics he would be.
It also strikes me as maybe that's something Nicolas Cage just did, that voice.
Yeah, I can see that.
And Richard Stanley is not going to tell him to not do it.
Yeah, and I guess until I did the red and blue purple thing, and then I got mixed up in my head of like, is it all politics and not just one? Because initially I was thinking like, what was that documentary called that you talked about on here like briefly, maybe a year ago? The Fox News one, where like the brainwashing of my dad. That's what it was.
Yeah. Fox News brainwashed my dad or something like that.
Yeah, like I was thinking about that because he was kind of like turning into Trump or something.
Yeah.
I'm just searching way too hard for meaning. And there's also a lot of like, I thought about climate change too, which is a lot more obvious.
Yeah.
And how, especially because it seemed like so many characters in the movie were ignoring it, despite like the hydrologist's warning. And then eventually the young girl, who's maybe a metaphor for Greta Thunberg, just kidding.
Man, you're watching this movie on another level.
That's a joke. Yeah, that's a joke. But the young girl starts to see everything, but then like everyone else is like not really reacting to it until like the shit really hits the fan. And so I don't know. Maybe there's something in there too.
Yeah, I don't know that I really come away with this movie saying that much about politics. I think what Mike said is a little bit probably more accurate. That Nicolas Cage just did a Trump impression, and that's just what ended up in there. I do think that there's some moments that didn't necessarily work for me, or like that they kind of waved away. Like at the towards the end of the movie, the Greta Thunberg character. She does the ritual, the Wiccan ritual, and she cuts herself all up, like all over the place. And then she's like running around a little bit, like 15 minutes later, and it makes me, why did she do that? Or like, what was the reasoning behind that? Was she actually doing a ritual, or was she going crazy? It's never exactly explained to me. And, I don't know. I would like maybe a little bit more explanation, or a little bit more understanding of what's happening. And I understand, like, while it's going on, we shouldn't necessarily have that explanation, or you don't necessarily need it, but I needed that explanation and understanding at some point.
You need to have faith that it means something.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need an explanation right there, but like, whenever that was going on for me, I got the sneaking suspicion that he just wanted to add like witch stuff into the movie, because like after watching the documentary, like he talks about his mom being a witch, and like he has his own witch doctor to cast spells on meetings with Hollywood executives that he goes to.
Yeah.
So I think he just wanted like, now I honestly get the impression that he just wanted to have like a positive portrayal where like the hero character was a witch, and like the cutting is just like something that she had to do that witches will get. Like,
yeah, maybe so.
That sounds stupid, but I honestly get the impression that that's what he would. That's when he wrote it. Like, that's what. Like, I don't know. I mean, do you guys disagree?
I think there's a bit more cutting. I mean, I'm not a Wiccan. I don't know that many Wiccans or anything like that, but I think that that's a bit more cutting than normal, right? Like, that's almost like suicide cutting is what she was doing.
I think I got the impression that she got into sort of a trance, because everybody in the movie, if I remember correctly, are all like the family members, had their sort of like trance moment where they did something weird and kind of like lost sight of like where they were.
Yeah.
You know, the brother character, the older brother character, got lost for a while. Even though he was just out back, the little kid was obviously entranced when it first happened, and then he was entranced with like the mom chopped her fingers off, that sort of thing. Like, I took that moment of her cutting herself as that time for her, when like it finally got to her. She writes something in her hand, doesn't she? Cut, like, she was finishing spelling something on her hand when she was cutting. I thought maybe I didn't catch it, but I thought maybe it spelled evolve.
I thought it was love, but yeah, evolve makes more sense than love.
Yeah, I thought love too, like on like first glance, and then I was like, no, wait a minute, that's something else. And then I think we were gone by the time I realized it wasn't love. But then I was like, maybe
that would be
evolve.
a cooler thing to write than love.
Yeah, and make more sense.
Yeah, agreed.
So I thought you wrote evolve, which maybe that adds some meaning to that, or maybe it's like, you know, the power communicating through her. Ultimately, it didn't add up to anything, because nobody, like Nick Cage is like, what happened to you? And then that's the end of talking about her having a bunch of cuts all over her body.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other really weird thing, and I got more into the movie at this point, even though by the end, I don't know that I felt that great about it. But whenever the mom and the little kid got fused together and became this like weird monster, you know, that
was the movie at its most Cronenberg.
Yeah, very Cronenberg, very The Thing. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed like the in terms of, you know, like grotesque, disturbing stuff. Like the way that
I
you
enjoyed the
that.
scene where they had to like deal with it, and they were like trying to decide what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the kind of horror that I think I respond to when it comes to that, like that body horror kind of stuff. Is like whenever they actually have to deal with the realism, like, oh my God, my wife and our brother or my son, or, you know, our family members have spliced together into like this monster. What does that mean? How do we deal with this? Like, whenever the movie's doing that, I think that's the movie at its strongest.
Yeah, I think so too. There's definitely those moments that started to grab me. I think, I don't remember who said it. One of you guys did that. You wish that it all felt like it added up to something, or you know, came to some better point. It does, and to me, it feels like a little bit random.
Yeah,
a lot of this stuff.
And I think that's where I respond to Annihilation a little more. Like, both movies feel a little like they want the audience to do a lot of the heavy lifting. With Annihilation in particular, I felt like there was a little bit more for me to lift and think about versus this movie. I feel like this movie is pretty surface level in a lot of its stuff. But that said, you know, it's way less of a budget, way more indie, and so I think it's a valiant effort.
I think it looks as good as Annihilation.
I think
it looks
the
better.
special effects in Annihilation, and the last act of Annihilation, is filmed in a much more expensive looking, artistically satisfying way than the stuff in this movie. But like I said, that's a budget thing.
Maybe. I like the way that this movie looks, 'cause I wasn't a fan of the way that Annihilation looked. Like, it wasn't pleasant to look at. And which, you know, not that a movie has to be, but I just didn't like the way that it looked. And this movie, I do like it. I like the way that it looks, in the way that I like the way that It Follows looks, is like very nice colors and very like sharp, sort of like crisp
digital saturation.
Yeah,
very digital looking.
Yeah, I really like that. I guess Under the Silver Lake kind of looks the same way from the same director, but it had those kind of tones to me.
It felt very small, like, but like good. Like, I'm trying to agree with you, but like not in a mean way. But like it feels small. It feels like all those movies you're describing, like It Follows, Color Out of Space, Under the Silver Lake. They feel like they're very good looking movies, but like they feel like they're very good looking because of color correction more than anything. And just I feel like just sometimes digital cameras like these days, like you don't need a lot of light, and you can really turn up the saturation, the color correction to get some really pretty images. All right, do we have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, no.
All right, cool. So we appreciate you sitting with us for that review of Color Out of Space. I hope you enjoyed this Richard Stanley heavy episode.
Yeah, of all the directors to really focus and dive in on. I mean, he's got an interesting story. Just like Richard Stanley. Okay. I'm not complaining. It's funny. It's funny that it's, it's kind of a lesser known guy.
Yeah, but it's the market's wide open for us to do a Richard Stanley podcast. Nobody else has done one that I know of. So,
in fact, there's a good chance he will find this episode.
Yeah, let's tag him on Twitter because I'm sure he has a Twitter account.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, then if that does it for this episode, then, thank you guys for listening. And then, of course, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Stay tuned to this channel. We put out content every week. Next week, we'll be doing a Casually Criterion episode where we're going to dive into Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which I think will be the third Stanley Kubrick movie we've done on this podcast, right?
Yeah, 2001, Barry Lyndon, and now Dr. Strangelove.
Nice.
Cool, yeah. Justin won't be here, so tune in. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So for the rest of time, you guys will have done 3 movies on here, and I will have only done 2.
Yeah.
Then that's going to be
You'll
weird.
have to do a solo podcast.
Yeah. And I actually did The Shining on Cinemusts, too, so.
Yeah, that's true, but that's not on here.
Kubrick couple years
cheater.
for me.
Well, if you have any questions you want to send us to talk about on our Dr. Strangelove episode or any episode in the future, send those to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast or our email casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate it, and we will see you when red meets blue and turns to purple.
That's true.
Figure that riddle out.
It's an election night. We get it, Chris.